Hello, I'm Toni Nieuwhof, and I'm an author of a book called Before You Split. I would love to answer some of your questions, so let's get right at it. What do I do if it seems like the life is drained out of my marriage? You know, when you're in that struggling place in a marriage, I talk about there being three options. You can split, survive, or save. Surviving is that state where you're together in your marriage, but it feels like your hearts are disconnected, or just like you've written in here, that it feels like the life is drained out of your marriage. The thing about that surviving stage is you can get through it, do the things you have to do, and you have your transactions, and if you have kids, you look after the kids, but you're missing that vital connection between the two of you. And that's hard. We're actually wired as humans for that intimate connection of love, and without it there is a pain. And so if you stay in this state over time, that emotional pain tends to leak out in one way or another. You can harness a period of surviving in your marriage to bring more life into it. Here's an exercise you can do. Each of you sit down and write out maybe a list of 15 different new things to you that would be interesting. And when you both do that, chances are there's going to be something on that list that overlaps. Try sharing that new experience together, because the research does show that even just sharing something new together can bring more life into your relationship. I think it just happens because of human nature that we can get into a negative way of communicating with each other. I don't mean just anger or sadness or anything like that. What I mean is that we can talk about our complaints more than we talk about compliments or praise. So see if you can maybe do an audit of where you're at and how could you shift that a little more toward the positive. Another pitfall that couples sometimes fall into without even realizing it is that they're lacking empathy with each other. You know, to see and be seen, to have intimacy, we really need to have that emotional connection and not denying them. You know, if your spouse comes home frustrated after a meeting that didn't go well, you know, avoid jumping right over into a solution, but instead sit with them in their emotion and say, oh, that must have been tough. I would feel like that too if I were in your shoes. How do I avoid a divorce? Hard work and humility. So when Carrie and I were struggling to the point where I wondered whether we were going to make it in our marriage, one of the key messages I heard was from Andy Stanley. He said there's this posture of mutual submission that you need to have in your marriage. And this shouldn't maybe have been a new teaching for me, but I heard it in a new way. He based it on 1 Peter 5, where he talked about pride versus humility. You know, pride wanting its own way, humility being more open and more willing to listen to your spouse and submit to what they want. It said, all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. When I heard that message that way, it occurred to me that if I take a prideful stance, if I keep insisting that I'm right, if I keep pointing the finger at Carrie, I'm actually setting myself up for opposition in my relationship with God. God actually favors that humble posture. It doesn't feel good to deliberately choose humility when you start out. But the benefits are that, well, you're going to learn. You're going to learn things about yourself. You'll recognize that, hey, maybe it's not all my husband's fault or my wife's fault. So how do you avoid a divorce? If you double down on that hard work of personal growth and introspection before God, praying and asking God to open your eyes to the hurts that maybe you are causing your spouse, that will set your marriage on a different path. And it may just create the kind of turnaround that my husband, Carrie, and I have experienced in ours. And I would certainly hope and pray for that for you. And so if any of this content has been helpful for you, subscribe to this channel and check out the links in the description.